Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Today I've got Jim MacLeod with me, and we're going to talk about something that I find really interesting, which is marketing and storytelling through design. And Jim's going to talk about how he feels that he's at the crossover of design and marketing, and he's got some really interesting things to say. Anyway, before we get into that, Jim, explain to people where they can get hold of you.
Hey, yeah, first off, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
I can be found at Jim MacLeod pretty much anywhere. Twitter, LinkedIn, jimmacleod.com, Instagram, whatever. So if you know how to spell MacLeod properly, you can find me.
And it's as you've got there on the screen, which is M small a small c capital L EOD. Fantastic. So Jim, you've got a really interesting your journey is really interesting about how you've got to where you are here. So why don't you share that?
Yeah, so originally I wanted to be an illustrator, went to school for graphic design, got really into graphic design, and then that evolved into web design, that evolved into web development, that then turned into digital marketing and marketing technology and social media, and it just kind of kept branching further and further into marketing.
Yep.
But I still kind of kept the design as the through line all the way through.
And because of that, what you've done also is that you look at marketing from a design perspective, don't you?
Yeah, I try to, because design it's all problem solving. It is, basically you get all your pieces and you have to put things together. And design's all about what's the most important thing that you want people to know. Okay, make that the biggest and most important thing. And then you kind of filter down on there, so that if you're on a page, a piece of paper or a social image or an email, how do you want people to consume that information? You can control that entire journey.
Yeah. And there's a whole science, isn't there, behind web page design
Absolutely.
and where the eye goes and stuff.
Absolutely.
So talk us through about how you got into marketing and what you found there, and because what you're doing is that you're bringing this design headset to marketing and the marketing function, whereas quite often people come to marketing either through a degree or having written content or something like that. So you've come about it from a different place, really, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of interesting because the way I got into it was working for small companies, large companies, agencies. The one thing about design is you see almost everything that's being created by marketing teams. So it's not, like the social teams focused on their images and their posts, and the content teams focused on this and that, and products focused on this or that. But sitting at design, you've got the wide angle lens of everything that's going on across the department. And that allowed me to really see what was working and then be able to say, I was in a good position to be able to say, hey, do you know that this person's also working on something similar? Maybe you two should work together. Or we've already done something like that with this other customer or this other, product line. Let's try to repurpose some of that. So just being able to see everything that's going on, because your design team almost acts in larger marketing teams. Your design team kind of acts as a hub of everything that's going on within the department.
Yeah, I can see that, and I can see where you say that you are the intersection between the two. So one of the things that we talked about when we did the preparation session was about using design and telling stories. So quite often we can understand storytelling in terms of this is we've got a piece of content, we need to pull people in and get them to understand there's an analogy or something like that. How are you doing that with design?
Well, a lot of times it's the key thing is consistency.
Yeah.
What you want is your audience to be able to say, okay, this piece, this piece, this piece, and this piece. So you've got 4 or 5 different marketing content pieces. They all belong to the same company. Like that's the first and most important thing. Have a visual brand associated with what you're doing. But with the actual content and using design properly, you can actually lead people through the funnel, through the different pieces. as they're going through their journey. And it's a little bit, so originally I said I wanted to be an illustrator, and I wanted to be a comic book illustrator, which is all sequential. And the best comic books basically go from panel 1, and the art in panel 1 leads you into the art in panel 2, and it's driving your eye around the page. But when it comes to marketing content, you can kind of bring that up a level so that you're going from piece 1 to piece 2 to piece 3, try to get people engaged all the way through.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, Eric Doyle, has just done he did a TEDx talk in Aberdeen at the weekend. And all of that is scripted. It's Word, but you can't bring the script. So they had or created storyboard panels, one single panel with a storyboard, which was the ways that they were using that as a way of tripping the mind, so they knew where they needed to be within the story. And I guess that's something similar, which is it was pictures, it was visual, and what you're doing is that you're walking through and making that connection and that story. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So if it's a particular campaign about something, you want some sort of visual through line that bridges everything within that campaign, from the landing pages to the emails to the social images to the content to whatever it is. If it's a specific campaign that a lot of effort's going into, there should be maybe it's a secondary color, maybe it's just like some sort of little element that goes through, but everything tied with that campaign should have a visual through line, so that when people see it, they're like, oh, I saw something similar that I liked or found informational or educational. Let me read this next one because I want to keep going on this journey.
Because the thing about content is that, or when you read stuff, is you don't know it's any good until you've read it.
Right.
So I guess what happens is that what's central to this is that if you read something, oh, that's interesting, what you're doing to get the person to read the next stuff, it's like, oh, well, that's similar to that one. That obviously that's got to be interesting, and I'm going to carry on and carry on reading.
Yeah, and that visual brand identity is critically important, especially when you get to social media. You're scrolling through and you're seeing so many, little blurbs and a lot of images these days, that the main goal is to get people to slow down and actually see what you're posting. And if it is like, okay, it's that, red, yellow, orange gradient, if I see this, like, oh, you know what? I liked it the last time I saw that, because it starts to trigger something in their brain that this is a sign
pattern
of
interrupt or
quantity or quality. Yeah.
So, and in terms of design with storytelling, is there still also a why, how, and a what to it as well?
Absolutely. So I've got a newsletter that was weekly. I took a couple of months off while I was switching jobs. But with my newsletter, one of the things I always do is, as I'm starting to storyboard the newsletter, which is an infographic, and the infographic is a recap of a recent marketing podcast. I always write why, how, what, the Simon Sinek, so that I'm telling the story going down the page, like why is this, how and what going down, because people care about themselves. They don't care about what you're selling or what your product is. They need to solve their problem. So if you start with the why, why this is important to them, they're much more likely to want to continue reading. Because if it's just like, we've got the fastest this, or we've got the largest that, who cares? I've got a problem to solve.
Yeah, and one of the things that you were saying, wasn't it, that you in your newsletter, one of the things that you do is you take a podcast, so podcasts that you've listened to, and actually turn it into an infographic.
Yes.
And so this is where we're seeing this crossover between traditional marketing and design, where you're taking while people say it's like repurposing content, it's not. That's not really. It's what you're doing is that you're actually changing its form, and you're changing it into a form that actually some people will. Some people won't listen to the podcast, whereas some people will read the infographic. So talk us through that.
Yeah, because I think everything's shifting to video and audio these days. But the reality is, you can't skim a video. You can't skim a podcast. Like, you're not just going to scrub ahead to the 12-minute mark and be like, oh, this is really interesting, because you have no idea what's been happening before that. But you can do that with visuals. And so it was like, okay, let's listen to a 30, 60-minute podcast And then we will, I then take it and reformat it so that it tells the story, the why, how, what going down. But it's like, this is important to you. Here's why it's important. And it goes down. And I'm hoping that people will see it and be like, oh, I do want to learn more about that. Let me go listen to the podcast, because it takes, what, a minute, 2 minutes to consume an infographic if you're going to read every single word in there. But, if that's valuable, they're going to go and then listen to the actual podcast itself.
So how long does that take? Is that like a long, is that, well, you've got to listen to the podcast, but,
Right.
And what's the process? Are you note taking and in effect building it as you go along, or how do you do it?
Usually I'll listen to the podcast, and sometimes I have to go through a bunch to find one that, like, there's enough content in there.
Right.
Because sometimes like, oh, this is a great nugget, and then the rest is all fluff. And then, it's because a lot of the times, like the first 10 minutes of most podcasts are their origin story. Well, I used to work here and blah, 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 blah. So, skim past that. And I just pull out like the useful nuggets that other people might find helpful. But so I listen to it, and then I write down my notes. And actually just this past week, I started using a platform called Otter.ai, which transcribes. It's an AI program to transcribe your podcast. So basically I hit play on Evernote or on Spotify and hit record on Otter, and it gives me the notes. And as I'm going through, I can pull out little things and highlight them, and pull them into notes, and then I can organize my notes. But then after I have my notes, I then pull out an actual sketchbook, paper and pencil, and I write down what the story that I want to tell, plus little just quick little sketches to kind of show like what I want to visualize with these areas. And then I open up Adobe Illustrator and I just start designing. And the guidelines I put in place, because originally it was just like, it's a fun thing that I want to challenge myself with. And it was like, okay, it can't look like anything I've done before, and it can't look like the brand of either the podcast or the person who was the guest on the podcast.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I take all that off, and I've got a white canvas, and I have to produce something in the next couple of days.
Right. And what was the app? Otter.ai or something?
Otter.ai, yeah, OTTER.ai.
Right. And so how long does that take? Is that a long process, or is it, I obviously understand that you do this as part of your, you could play chess, or you could paint, but you're doing design on this.
Yeah. It's probably 5 to 10 hours a week that I put into this. It kind of depends on how, sometimes it comes really quick and I'm just done. Other times I'll get to like the bottom. There have been a couple that I've actually just thrown out like on a Thursday, and I'm like, this just isn't working. Or there was one week I designed one and I was like halfway through designing, and then I started listening like for next week's episodes, and I'm like, oh, this design style would work so much better with this topic.
Right.
So I basically had to create a whole new design style for that. I already had the story that I wanted to tell, but I needed a new design style to layer on that because I wanted to use it for the next one.
And so is this something that you're, are you doing this weekly or just as ad hoc?
A weekly is the goal. So I did the first 26 weeks of the year. I put one out every week, and then took a couple weeks off, and then, did one or two, and then August hit, and then I switched jobs at the end of September, early October. So I took 2 months off there because there was a whole lot of information I need to hand off to my former coworkers, and then new stuff I need to learn at the new job. So I actually just restarted this past weekend. I'm currently working on this week's episode or issue, so that should hopefully be out on Sunday. But I'm working for a startup, so there are going to be weeks where I'm just flooded, and there just won't be an issue that week.
And is this, and if people want to get hold of it, do they go to your website and subscribe, or?
Yep. Yeah, it's on. There's a link on my website, or jimmacleod.substack.com is the other place you can find it, or on my LinkedIn. I republish it on LinkedIn on Mondays.
Okay.
So I send it out as the newsletter.
If they're connected to you or follow you on LinkedIn, they'll get it on the Monday anyway.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, and in terms of that, in terms of that infographic, is there certain things that we know that there's a why, how, and a what, but is there anything else that you're pulling into that? because they're, if you're taking the content of an hour, there must be an awful lot of stuff that you filter out.
There's a lot of, kind of the small talk in there, or like the examples, when someone's like, here's the information and here's an example of how it's been used. Sometimes I'll pull those out, like the little case studies that happen throughout it. But it's been a really interesting, fun thing to do. And it's a fun challenge to have to, come up with a complete brand almost every single week.
Oh, absolutely. But it's interesting that as you say, that what you've done is that you've taken, in effect, a video piece of content just like this, and then what you've done is that you've turned it into an infographic, and actually made that switch in terms of the in effect the content or the way it's consumed. Whether it's the same content, but it's consumed differently.
Correct. Yeah. It's a quick little digestible version of the podcast or of the video.
And is there, do you have any advice to anybody else who would be thinking about doing this, or is there any advice?
It took me a while. So I've been part of a couple different communities, especially when like the creator economy really started firing up last year. Joe Plitzy's Tilt community has been really inspirational. And so I was trying to think of like, okay, well, what can I do? What do I want to do? And it took me a while to kind of land on this particular topic, but it is, it's just kind of getting out there, finding what you really want to do, because this thing, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so, but it's something I really enjoy doing because it's learning about marketing, which I'm obsessed with, and then also challenging myself with design. So it's, I really needed something that would keep me going, because like, oh, this is a good idea. But, because I actually tried another newsletter before this, which was when I was teaching my kids graphic design. I was doing a write-up, but that was taking hours. And I was like, oh, I just don't want to write and find sources and imagery and just, I'm like, I'd rather just do something with design. And then it just dawned on me one day, it was a shower thought. I'm like, oh, I could do this. And then I started at the beginning of the year, and it just kind of took off from there.
It's kind of like Sudoku, isn't it?
Yeah. Because I've got all the pieces. And then, I know kind of what I want to do, but now it's my own unique take for how that story is going to be told.
And so, in terms of people getting into it, it's something that you've chosen to do. Do you think that you need to have a particular, because you've got a very mixed background of design, marketing, and that is there advice for other people in terms of what they could do or direction that they could go into? Not necessarily do what you're doing, but to use those skills in different ways.
So for a long time, I would use design to do freelancing and help other people. And, that was a great way to learn a lot of different styles, learn the way different clients worked. But then for like my own kind of like personal pet project, I didn't want somebody telling me what to do.
Right.
So it was, basically find something you love to do and then find a way to be able to do it where nobody's telling you what to do.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I'm the designer through creative director and copywriter, and publisher. So it's all mine. And now I'm getting into some video aspects of it also, because I've just started recording some videos for Twitter and LinkedIn, where I'm actually talking about my process, where I'm showing, okay, this is what my artboard looks like with my 47 different files on there. And I'm using the Mobius Airglass to really kind of show the transparency, because it's nice that I can be on camera like this, which is something I'm not comfortable or not used to doing. But then also kind of showing the art and the style and the work that I'm doing in the background.
Do you have multiple cameras then, or like one above your head where you're showing that, or is it?
No. So with the software, it actually allows me to be semi-transparent on top of my Illustrator screen, my Evernote screen, whatever it is. So I can change my opacity depending upon whether I want people to see the screen or to see me really easily.
Okay, that's cool. And what app is that?
It's called Airglass.
Right.
And it's by Mobius.
Right. Fantastic. Sounds really interesting. So, Jim, thank you so much for today. It's a fascinating ride through design and marketing. Thank you for coming on and sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, no, it's such an interesting topic. Jim, remind people again where people can find you.
I am at Jim MacLeod, MacLeod, on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, my website, my Substack newsletter. If you just search for that, I will most likely show up first.
And also they can follow you on LinkedIn, and they'll get the newsletter also on Monday.
Yes. Yep.
Fantastic, Jim. Thank you so much for today and coming on and chatting about your hobby as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's something I'm real passionate about, so I'm glad I've been able to turn it into something positive for others.
Great. Jim, thank you so much for today.
Great.
Thanks. Bye.